Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, the Players Podcast, the Prognosticators Podcast, the Only Flyers podcast. Can't even say prognosticators right. It's a big day. It is a massive day. The Philadelphia Flyers are bringing over Matvei Michkov, the top prospect in the system, the top prospect that everyone, and I mean everyone, has been looking forward to seeing. He is finally going to be a member of the Philadelphia Flyers. It happens early. It happens well before anyone expected. And we're here to break it all down. It's not going to be a very long show today. I've already wasted these guys' time with about 15 minutes of this computer melting down in North Carolina. Anthony might have just gotten in a car accident. Bundy's in the middle. And I've interrupted his viewing of Scotty Scheffler, who we're all, I guess, cheering for as a collective. But guys, it's a big day, a very big day for the Philadelphia Flyers. And why weren't you the first one to report it? Let's start there.
Well, first of all, I thought it was a big day because your hair is completely out of whack today.
I have sunnies in my
because we should let everybody know, if you were trying to broadcast from outside at the beach house in the Outer Banks, and you wanted everybody to see the beautiful beach behind you.
Beautiful backdrop.
Right? That's what the whole problem was with the computer. That was the issue.
That was part of the problem.
Why wasn't I the first to break it? Because I was off today. I was out with my son, who's here in the car with me, Ant Jr., kind of hanging out, doing a, father-son day like we do every Sunday. And then all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, this is crazy. So I'm in the process of driving home now. And because Sunday is a fun day, then we have to kind of throw it together as quickly as we can. And we are doing this. But I did speak with, a couple people, but one pretty important person within the Flyers to kind of get all the details. And it is, in fact, a thing that's going to happen where, he is coming over. Obviously, we know this is true, but he will not be here for development camp. The Flyers need to get him his visa, and they need to sign him to a contract. I was told that the contract negotiation will not be an issue, that it will be perfectly fine to get that done. That will happen pretty quickly. The visa is the question, how long that will take. The thought process is it will be sometime within the month, probably closer to the end of July. So he will miss development camp, but that he will be here, and he'll probably start working out with the guys like they do. Bundy, you know how it is. Kind of get over a little bit early. They're unofficial practices and the like, but they'll start doing some stuff then, and we'll see him here for training camp. I'm sure they'll have a press conference at some point when he gets over, but at the same time, Matvei Michkov will be in the Flyers lineup, barring an injury, on opening night.
I can't wait till he sits down and meets Attila the Hun. He's really going to have fun then. Maybe Genghis Khan. You know what's funny, though, guys? And hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Afternoon. I finally got back to sit down for a few minutes, and this is what I get. Let's go, boys. We got an emergency. Awesome. It's the first question I get from everybody calling going. The first thing is, what do you think that's going to look like with Torts? That's a fair question. It's a fair question. Yeah, it is. It's, that's the first one you get. I mean, historically, first of all, it's great for the young guy to come over. You can tell he was excited to be a Flyer last year, even from Russia, and I always tell people to kind of temper their expectations a little bit, just relax. We've had Eric Lindros come here before in 91 or 92 after that thing. So, I mean, there's been a lot bigger scenarios that have happened in Philadelphia, but this is exciting because, there's a new type of skill in the NHL. You've seen a lot of it on display. Connor McDavid, Draisaitl, a lot of those guys. And this guy, we hope, falls into that type of skill level. Obviously, we've seen those other players show the competitiveness with that skill, but I'm excited for his opportunity to start. It certainly kind of lifts the look of the team, in terms of their skill level. There's a lot of unanswered questions, guys, that they're going to have. It'll take a couple of years to continue moving forward with. First off, who's going to get him the puck? That's a huge question. We need a guy like this is going to need a center iceman. The other question is what does that look like? What does it look like playing for Torts for a guy like this? If you look back at historically teams that he's been on with skilled players, he's run them into the ground, a lot of them. You could take a look at two right now that are struggling finding identities with teams. Dubois and Laine, right? Laine was there, right? He was there for a little bit, right, with Torts? If I'm right, Columbus?
Yeah. I think
he was.
I think he was at the end of Torts' tenure. I think it was.
I think you're right. Anyway, but those are all like fair questions a little bit. So I think you have to look at that. And the other side of it too is, I mean, he's also going to learn, like a little bit of old school, and I think to have in the league through Torts and through that system a little bit, which I think is a good thing to have. But his skill will certainly add a lot to the fray. I do I know the excitement's off the charts right now, but just relax, everybody. Let the kid be. He's 19 years old. He's got a long way to go to learn the game over here, the ice, and he will learn it, and he will be a very, very good talent, because you don't get talked about like this. Guys don't get mentioned like this in this kind of texture unless he's highly gifted, and he is. So, again, I would say the biggest thing would probably be who's coaching him coming in. That could be a good thing. It could be a really bad thing. We'll see what happens with that. And but I'm looking forward to that skill level coming in here. It's going to be certainly interesting. He looks like an energized guy. And the one thing I asked Jonesy about last year, after the draft, I said, what kind of a motor does he have on him? Jonesy said he's got a great motor. And that's important. It's not just about skill. There's a lot of dogs out there that have skill that just don't have the compete or the will. And there's probably been a few names, as a matter of fact, linked to the Flyers over the last couple of weeks that I think would fill that type of persona. But it's not this guy. Michkov is apparently the real deal. But he's got a journey in front of him. They're not coming in here and winning a cup with him as the leader like McDavid next year. This is going to take a lot of time, and he's got a lot of hockey to learn. He's just a kid. And I always tell people that enjoy the skill that you will see next year, and you will see it. And then there's going to be nights where you're probably going to say, why is Torts going to put him in the press box? Those are the things, Anthony, that we know that you have to live with a kid like this, right? And I'll be honest with you, if he's healthy and I'm the coach, he's playing 82 games no matter what. There's no need to sit a kid like this out during the year if he's doing the right things, and I think he will. But that's a big project right there. And there was obviously, I think, when you look at the management bringing him over, this was a huge point, I think, for them to, again, get the fans in the building, more excitement. I mean, they used up their Torts clout for 2 years, right? That came in and it was exciting for 2 weeks and then kind of fell into place. But you have to find excitement through a player. And this is the first one under this new regime that there's been a ton of excitement about. So I understand it from the fans. I understand it from our standpoint, too. We're thrilled. It gives us a lot to talk about at the games next year up on press row. But I also tell people, just let the kid be a kid for a while before you fully judge him. It's going to be an exciting time.
I agree.
Well, go ahead.
I agree with you on that, Bundy. And one of the things, I was talking to a couple of our regulars who stop up at the press row show. Texted me today. They were all asking questions, the guys who come up there and see us all the time, and they're like, "Hey, man, is this what do you think? Is this expedite the rebuild?" And I said, "Look, it helps, but I don't think it expedites anything. And if anything, I want to make a comparison." And I told them, make it a comparison too, as you already mentioned. When Lindros first came over, he was exciting and great and awesome and fun to watch, but those teams were terrible, right? I mean, they were not good teams. Same thing I would say, when Ovechkin came over for the Capitals, he was, you can't miss his games because he's so talented, but those Capitals teams sucked. And the same thing with Crosby when he first started in the league. The Penguins were awful, but he was a star. You can enjoy the player, but don't think that suddenly ramps up the expectation for this next coming season. I think that nothing changes as far as how they're going to approach 24-25. Maybe it expedites it a little bit for 25-26, and beyond. But I think 24-25, the approach is still going to be exactly the same that Danny's been saying all along. It's probably one of those, hey, if we compete, great type of years, but we may not be a competitive enough team, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that the rebuild is taking a step back. It just means that they got to dump some dead money, get rid of a couple of players, and then really start pushing forward starting next season.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Anthony, I'm wondering, he's a young guy coming over here also, and this appears like it's going to be done and signed before the free agency starts. You know what? I actually wanted to say something about that free agency. I mean, will the funeral still be on Friday if Florida loses tomorrow? Because Edmonton should be just proud of it.
Yeah.
Dude, it'll be a fucking mess watching that table tomorrow or Friday if Florida loses. Like, they'll be like at the funeral at their table, like, well, we just lost an 0-3 lead in the final, and now we got to draft some kid last in the league, last in the first round.
Actually, they don't, because the Flyers have their pick.
That's exactly right. So go ahead, Russ. No bomb?
No, it's fine.
Okay, good. So I was just
fine.
saying, though, that, so again, but does it give you an opportunity in free agency to get somebody that could be perhaps a mentor, even if it's not a long-term play? You know, where you get a guy in here, teach him, help him work on his language, transitioning to English, while also being, you know, somebody that could probably help him on the ice. And I don't know who's out there. It would have to be a Russian. Man, why did you trade Provorov, man? I filled the bill. I don't. That's a good one though. So I do think maybe you could entice a free agent here though. Maybe somebody that would maybe go off course because he's here. If he maybe pay him a little bit more to come in and say, hey, let's help this guy along. That's something maybe you have to spitball a little bit.
I mean, one thing you can definitely think of. There's a team across the state that, as of a few months ago, was actively trying to potentially move a Russian guy, who also happens to be a very good scorer, in Evgeny Malkin. There's no chance in hell that the Flyers and Penguins ever execute a trade. But boy, oh boy, if there were ever a time, that would be it. I think that, and I pulled up a few of the comments on the screen here, but I think that where most people's heads are going to right now is kind of something that we talked about on the last episode, that idea of the move up to the move up. The move up from 12 to 7, and then potentially from 7 to 4, if a certain player is there, and that player is Ivan Demidov, who, of course, everyone knows, is also a young Russian stud player. And as I jokingly said on the last episode, I'd much rather go with the young stud Russian players with high ceilings, more so than the milquetoast guys that Chuck Fletcher was pulling out of Minnesota ponds. Now, the likelihood of it happening is probably pretty low. Although, we did see the report yesterday that there's a young player out west who has told their team, reportedly, I don't want to play for you, who happens to be friends with Quitter Gauthier. Could Ivan Demidov come off with a masterful power play of his own, akin to what Michkov allegedly did with the Coyotes around the draft? Could Demidov, who's been going up on a lot of teams' board, could he start all of a sudden refusing calls? Could his agent potentially make it known he has no interest in playing for you? And just enough for the Flyers to get up to a position to draft him. I'm not saying it will happen.
I'll let Anthony take this. I don't like playing like that, Russ. I'll be honest with you. I think there should be an actual fine for the player. So say if you hold up a team and you grab them by their balls and you say, you know what, fuck you, I'm not playing there, I don't like it. Like, you're eventually, I'm telling you, it's going to happen to Canadian teams eventually. And it is. Like, you're going to have guys drafted to be like, I don't want to fucking play here. But that has to stop, and there has to be a penalty for that. Like, you have to fulfill your 3-year deal to the team that drafts you. Otherwise, you know what? Say, okay, if you're going to do that and you don't want to sign, then there has to be some kind of a financial penalty for the player. Because eventually, if this continues, it's going to continue where you have what looks like the NBA. You got about 8 teams that guys kind of say, oh, I want to go here. Like, you got that guy, the guy that couldn't win on his own. He went to Golden State. Kevin Durant. And then he just goes around trying to pluck teams that seem best for him, but it's not really about that. And I don't want to see the NHL come to that. You know, like, imagine if it's something like Connor McDavid came back in and said, you know what, fuck it, I'm not going to Edmonton. I don't want to play in that town. I don't like customs. I don't like it too north. It's too cold in the winter. And eventually, we're getting close to that. Like, we're at almost at full prima donna level with kids. I've talked to many coaches in different sports, especially my son getting recruited, and it's a normal type of thing. So I think people have to understand that and realize that you just can't do that. You have to play for the team that drafts you. It's the right thing to do. And it's the honorable thing to do, especially in the league. It's not the GM's fault that he's in Winnipeg or somewhere. So that this has to stop, and there has to be penalties implemented for like a guy like Gauthier. Like, that was just a ballless, classless move to a town like Philly. Imagine saying you don't want to play in Philly. How long is it going to be before someone says, fuck Ottawa, I'm not going there, I'm from Ottawa. I wouldn't play there either, but I'm just saying that. And no, I'm being dead honest. I wouldn't want to play there. And I'm telling you, we're not close from players dictating in this league where they want to play.
I do want to get to this super chat that Rory sent over. Thank you, Rory, for the super chat. says, shows the Flyers didn't mistreat Quitter. And if you think about it, this kind of, I think, goes back to a much larger thing that the Danny Briere has brought to the table, which is they've negotiated now for multiple players to come out of the KHL, specifically from Russia. Ivan Fedotov, who we thought had been long gone, taken off the board, gets brought over. Matvei Michkov, who was drafted on the assumption, the belief that it was going to be 3 years. See you in 3 years, kid. They figured out a way over the past few months, over the past year, however long it's actually been, which we may or may not eventually find out over some time. They figured out a way to get him out of that deal, or I guess I should say he figured out a way to get himself out of that deal. The Flyers maintain a very strong relationship, it would appear, with teams in the KHL. I think this all of a sudden does open up the potential for them long-term to maybe be able to gamble on players that might be under contract in the KHL. And I think it does put them in a very unique position as being one of only very few teams who's actually managed to do this now on multiple instances in the last couple of years. It truly hasn't been done like this at this level in recent memory, unless I'm missing 5 or 10 really great examples, Ant.
No, I mean, I would say that you probably had, Washington had a good pipeline there for a little bit. Obviously, Detroit, when you go back to the Russian Five, they had a good pipeline over there, a good way of doing it. But you're right in the sense that, most teams don't have that. I do want to just be careful in how you say it. I mean, I want to be careful in how you say something. But it's you're not really having relationships with the teams specifically, just to clarify. It's more that the agent that you are working with has the relationship. And of course, they have a scout over there who has boots on the ground who can talk to the player. So there are relationships that exist, but it's just to clarify, it's not between the Flyers and the team like SKA or any other team in the KHL. That is not allowed. That would be a violation. So just make sure that we.
Yes, that we put out there. There is definitely no way that the Philadelphia Flyers and SKA St. Petersburg ever had a conversation. There is absolutely no chance it ever happened. It definitely only happened between the player and his agent and the team. Yes, 100%.
Just saying.
I don't really. I hate like how the sausage was made here. I just know that we got the sausage. That's it. Exactly. I don't really give a shit about how all the X's and O's in paper. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I'd get him the fuck on a plane real quick, though, because if it comes to Russia, who knows? They may pull that thing back. Anything goes down over there.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing. Like, I mean, I was told today that it's going to take about 3 weeks for the visa to get done. They will obviously they'll try and start the visa application once they get the contract finalized, because you can't apply for a work visa until there's proof of work, right? So like there are steps that actually, so it's like, oh, well, just start applying for the visa, and then when you get the deal finalized, you get to no, they got to get the deal finalized first, then they got to apply for the visa. So there are little subtle things that have to still happen behind the scenes, which is why he won't be here as soon as.
The first thing would be to get him on a plane with a pilot and get the plane in the air. That's it.
Yes, that should be the first. That should be the first.
We'll worry about the rest. That's the only part of the sausage I need to figure out how it's made. Guys, I can't believe. I know this is. It's going to be pretty cool. It'll be a little buzz tomorrow. Tomorrow's the Flyers alumni golf tournament. I cannot believe that it's on the same day as the Game 7 of the final. I said it the other day, the NHL, Anthony, I listened back to you guys, to your pod the other night when I came on with you guys when I was in the car, and they got to fix this. This is unacceptable. Like, to be at this date now where you're still playing, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like, start the games. There's no need for 2 days off between each shift. If you want to do it in the finals, that's fine, but then don't do it in like the 2 previous series.
Yeah, well, to me, this all stems from the beginning of the year, Bundy, and it really comes down to, why are you waiting till mid-October to start the regular season? You push yourself into this position. You put yourself into this precarious position. I understand why they extended the finals as long as they did, because travel from Fort Lauderdale to Edmonton sucks, right? But
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. And that's fine. But build
Yeah.
yourself in the possibility of two teams being that far apart from each other, potentially meeting in the finals, by having the time that you need to extend that, where it's, if you're ending in, early to mid-June, as opposed to the week of the freaking draft. I mean, there are trades being made for next season, and this season isn't even over yet. And the draft is this week.
It's actively unfair to the teams. And I know like nobody's going to feel bad for the Panthers or for the Oilers because they're competing for the cup, but it does put them at an active disadvantage. Like if you think about it, like I get that from the perspective of a front office, your job is pretty much done. When your team makes the cup final, for all intents and purposes, unless there's a catastrophic injury and you have to figure out some back and forth or who's going to replace, like your job is done. You really can start to focus on the draft. But as an organization, you can't. Like, your coach is typically part of that discussion about what kind of player are we targeting, having those meetings. You can't do that because you're actively trying to prepare to try to reach the pinnacle of your sport. And I don't know what it was or what actually caused Florida to kind of have the bottom fall out the way that it has. But
well, you woke an offensive machine, and that's what you did. You woke the most gifted offensive talent we've seen in 30 years, and he's playing with kids. You're right.
But
though,
but in Game 6 though, Bundy, like he was,
yeah, but
he didn't have a shot. I mean, he was still the gravity matters. Like McDavid's gravity on the ice definitely matters, 100%. But something is broken in Florida. We had a super chat here that I want to make sure that we get to before we go anywhere else or before we wrap up today. From Corey over on YouTube. Says, before you go, can you give your thoughts on the Cup final? It would be the ultimate choke if Florida loses, worse than 28-3, in my opinion.
Yeah, well,
is it more of a choke, Bundy, or is it more of the Oilers really grabbing this series and earning it?
Oh, it's a fucking choke, and it's epic. You can't go to a Stanley Cup final, have dominated 3 games. I will say this, and you could make a case that if Edmonton played the last 3 games and they had the result in Game 1, Edmonton would have won this already in 6 games. They would have won it, clinched it the other night, because I think they deserve better in Game 1. Bob was great, but what happened was in Game 4, and I've been to a final. Unfortunately, I only played 4 of them. We didn't get a win, but they'll stick with you. That's almost as bad. I would rather lose 4-0 now than have a 3-0 lead and possibly blow it. And I do think Florida is going to blow it. I may be wrong. Maybe Tuesday would come out. It almost feels like if I was on Florida and I won the cup tomorrow night, I would feel like I halfway won it. It's like, yes! Oh my God, thank God. Like it was going to, I'd really have more of a party next week. But I don't know how Florida's going to figure this out. Now, they're going to say all the right things and do all the right things between now and then. But there's absolutely the wheels have come off that bus. 5 goals now they've scored in 3 games. I think they've given up 20, if I'm not mistaken. And I just don't know how in one moment you're going to be able to flip the script in 2 days. They might. It's a Game 7, right? You flip a coin, anything can happen, Anthony, Russ, and that might. Maybe Florida gets a shitty goal tomorrow night that we have no idea about, and that carries some momentum and gives them the life they need. But I don't know how you're going to keep Connor McDavid off the scoreboard 2 games in a row. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think Florida has done a good enough job using the third man to help with McDavid, the center. It's one thing. People say when we play Yager, like, oh, yeah, I did a great job. I did. But I also knew that I had a big center iceman coming down the middle for backup, and I had another great partner, by the way, named Eric Desjardins. But still, that was my side of the ice. They need to do a better job of trying to take some ice away from him. And they did a decent job last game. But I think McDavid was just snake bit. Well, I'll say this. I think Edmonton may blow them out tomorrow night, like another 4-1 or 5-2. That's all I got.
I'm stunned by this. Like the Game 4, 8-1, that was whatever. I kind of felt like that was Edmonton saying, okay, we're not going to sweep. You're not going to sweep us. They showed up and finally had that game. The Game 5 was the one that I was surprised by. I think that's the one that really kind of, Bundy, in a lot of ways, like the Game 5 you talked about against New Jersey in 2000. Like that was the game you should have won, and just came out and you guys shit the bed. And Florida basically did the same thing. They were good after they were down and tried to come back in that game. but they got themselves in such a spot, and then they couldn't pull it out. And then Game 6, they were just terrible. They were terrible. And I think that they were kind of impacted a little bit. They get behind early. I cannot believe they overturned the offside goal that would have cut it to 2. I blows my mind. It honestly blows my mind that Edmonton even challenged it, because it was so close to not even being. I don't even know if you look at it.
I think it was the right call. I do.
Yeah,
they showed the correlation. It looked like the right call.
Yeah, it's tough, but it's so tough because you're in that situation. You're up 2-0, right? If you lose that challenge, now you just give Florida, who just scored a goal, a power play, right? Because you lost the challenge. Now they have a chance to tie the game in an elimination game for the Stanley Cup final. Like, I don't even take that gamble. Like, I think it was so close and so risky, but yet it goes against Florida. And now Florida kind of feels like, wow, the whole world is against us. Like, everybody's against us. And that kind of creeps in a little bit, and they were just terrible from that point forward. I think you're going to get a much better effort from the Panthers at home in Game 7. I think that they kind of took a little bit for granted at the beginning of Game 5, and then they were the better team on home ice once they were down and can't kind of try to come back. I felt like they were significantly the better team. I think on home ice with the last change, you're going to see a better version of the Florida Panthers. I still think they're going to win this game and avoid the ignominy of losing 4 straight and blowing the final. I still think Florida pulls it out.
Just to note here, it looks like Bobrovsky didn't skate.
Big deal.
I wouldn't start him anyway. I would have started Stolars. I already said it on Twitter.
Stolars and Spencer Knight were both out there earlier today, but no Bobrovsky. Interesting.
Yeah, I would have actually put Stoli in. Just you got to do
something. Would you do that for Game 7 though, Bundy? Like that really.
I don't care, because the other guy's having trouble stopping a lot anyway. So throw a wrinkle at them where they're like, because Edmonton's going to think it's going to look a lot easier, and sometimes it isn't. Paul Maurice is on the cusp of being called the biggest loser maybe in hockey history of modern times. So they got to do something, and so is Florida. This doesn't count as like the 0-3, like the semis or the conference finals or whatever. This is a Stanley Cup final, 3-0. I mean, you're on the cusp of either coming back and making it, saying, hey, it was a great series and Florida pulled it off in 7 after the great 3-0 lead they had and the comeback by Edmonton, or we're all saying, man, that Florida's a pile of losers. And I'll tell you what, I'll just turn on the TV Friday night to see that table, because that's still going to look like a funeral procession if they lose. Edmonton, it won't be, because they, I think they play with house money a lot. They kept wondering who they were during the year, and I mean, they really fell on the backs of their captain and best player and a couple other guys to get the job done, and that's why they have nothing to be ashamed of at all.
All right, well, guys, I think it's probably a good place to wrap. We have a lot of people asking about the Ant's frozen. I'm gonna remove him for a second, and if he comes back, we'll finish up with him. But Bundy, a lot of questions in the comments, obviously about Konechny, what Michkov coming over now, does that impact the negotiation for Travis Konechny? I know that Anthony was kind of sourcing info on that one today, and I think it was something that he wanted to get to, but since he's now dropped off, let's make that. We'll put a pin in it until a little bit later this week, because we'll have to come back around the draft. We have to see what the Flyers do. We'll of course have coverage. I will be on vacation, but I will still be here and working, and you will be available, and Ant to some extent will be available. We'll put something together around the draft. It's a big, big week for the Philadelphia Flyers, and it all starts with the number 1 prospect in the organization, Matvei Michkov, coming over much earlier than anticipated.
Welcome.
And ultimately, it is a big, big day for the Philadelphia Flyers, and especially for a fan base that has long yearned to have a guy like this on the team. So, big thank you to everybody who joined. We got a bunch of super chats in here at the end about, Gary B saying, I won't get my Michkov jersey till August. BJ Beretta saying, no comment, just adding dead money to my checking account in solidarity with the Flyers cap and to show my genuine support for the amazing coverage. We want to thank everybody. And I will note, and I know that Ant would probably, do the thing where he tends to put up, disclaimers and everything. Hockey News Hub, who is really the account that was on top of this from the start with Michkov, who has been doing the transcriptions of the Russian interviews and everything. He's now put out, I assume he, she, whoever, whatever their pronouns are, that apparently Michkov has signed the ELC. There are no details, but Hockey News Hub, who's been at the forefront of a lot of this, has put that out there. I assume that if that is true, it will be verified here, if not by the end of Sunday, probably by the draft. But hey, Bundy, we said all along, St. Petersburg's president said, there will be a resolution before the end of June, and with a few days to spare, we got that resolution.
You're going to say goodbye to the beard because it's coming off tomorrow.
Is the beard coming off because Michkov is coming over, or is the beard coming off because the Stanley Cup Finals over?
Yeah, I was hoping to be a week ago, but it's still going in there. It's just itchy and hot. I'm done. All right. That was for you guys.
Hey, a big thank you to everybody who joined us live. Big thank you to everybody who listens in the podcast feed after the fact over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for finding us. We do this kind of stuff all the time. It's a lot of fun. There are a bunch of episodes in the archives, some great interviews that we've done over the years. You can find them in the podcast feed. You can find them on YouTube. But big thank you to everybody, and we will be back later this week with some draft coverage. So for Bundy, who you can find on Twitter at Therien6, for Anthony SanFilippo, who hopefully didn't crash his car, at AntSanPhilly, I'm Russ, at Joy on Broad. Thank you so much for watching, maybe even listening to Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. We will talk to all of you later this week. Matvei Michkov is a Philadelphia Flyer.